I'm Ollie James, Head of Sales at C2. Have the pleasure of working with these two gentlemen on a daily basis and see a lot of you guys as well, so good to have you here. I think we've got just over 30 minutes, so we've got lots to cover, so we're going to get into the meat of it very quickly. But Stefan, could you introduce yourself, your role, and the organisation that you work for?
Yes, of course. My name is Stefan Graf. I'm from Commerzbank in Germany, one of the largest private banks in Germany. And I am heading our COE, Smart Automation, with around 120 employees focusing on process automation. And I am also the director of our newly founded subsidiary, which is called Yellow Automation, where we have bundled all our automation skills and employees within one subsidiary with a target of specializing on process automation and maybe in future also be able to serve external clients in terms of process automation.
Perfect. Cheers, Stefan. And Dan?
Thanks, Ollie. So yeah, I'm Dan Humanick. I'm the automation architect within the UK Zurich team. Focused primarily on RPA automation at the moment, but expanding into difference. Not quite as large as your team, but we've got a centre of excellence with 4 federated hubs and serve the UK business as a whole.
Perfect. And from our interactions in the past, I know that you guys started some time ago with a variety of different technologies. Could you give us an idea as to why you started your automation centre of excellences? Stefan?
Yeah. We started back in 2017, mainly in our back office operations in order to gain efficiencies. So it was FTE reduction, which was and is still the main driver. And in the meanwhile, we have automated more than 260 processes, which with an FTE gain of 1,200 FTE in total over the last, let's say, 8 years. And currently we are running around 180 processes which are doing with our digital workers. They are called COBs, Commerzbank Bs. So 180 processes with around 400 COBs which are doing the work for around 800 FTE.
Perfect, thanks Stefan. And Dan, why did you start? What challenges were you looking to solve?
So when we started in automation, I think it was back in 2015, we originally started actually in a federated model with teams without a centre of excellence. Now, the reason we formed the COE was we found challenges with governance and delivering at pace rather than same teams working on similar projects. So now we have a centre of excellence, as mentioned, with 4 federated hubs, got around, we've just dropped down to 50 digital workers. We did have 200, but some of the efficiencies we've gained from C2 have led us to be able to sort of downscale that and still hit the same SLAs, which has been very nice. We have over 200 automated processes, don't quite deliver the FTE mentioned there, but we do have over 1.2 million transactions so far this year. So,
perfect, excellent. I think what's really interesting around how we speak to our customers who are in different parts of the journey, and I think the challenges and the points you're looking to solve at the beginning versus what you're solving now, sometimes things change and sometimes priorities change. So how have things developed from 2015 to 2017, what's changing in terms of the challenges that you have, but also the value? And I think you touched on this a little bit on yours around still a priority is FTEs. But what's changed during that time of starting off in automation and now both having achieved significant scale?
Yes, well, when you are starting such an automation journey, you first need to build up the skills, obviously, and then you have a ramp up with automation of processes. And first you are trying to automate as fast as possible, but then you come to the point that you have a huge amount of processes and your process operation team is growing and growing. And then you need the license usage is growing, the usage of infrastructure, VDIs is growing, and also the process controller teams is increasing. And then you have to look after operational stability. Yeah. And that was our main reason why we introduced C2 in order to make sure that we are operational stable. Because, for example, if you have a major outage, which happens from time to time, unfortunately, and you have like 400 bots which are down and you need to start them manually, you need a lot of stuff if you will do it in a short time frame, or you will need a lot of time to start them manually, and you are breaching all of your SLAs. So this is one of the major improvements we made with C2, that our interactions from our process controller stuff with Blue Prism decreased by more than 90%. So C2 is doing our, let's say, first level support for all of our bots, and this is really a major success.
Perfect. And Dan, from your perspective?
I think the biggest change we've probably noticed was when we first started, we were a delighter. We were saving the business time and effort and bringing some money in. So that helped us a lot. As we scaled, you then need to kind of reinvent yourself and become something more. So we always had this vision that our controllers would have insights into these digital workers, that they would be able to bring improvements and actually act as like a first line support. What we found was the reality, as you mentioned, you have a problem, things need restarting. It was a lot of button clicking, and actually these people do bring great value. So how do we reinvest that value into the team? And that was where C2 came in for us. It's allowed us to actually, upskill some of our process controllers in other elements, and you start seeing becoming more points of contact with the business and driving that ownership of the business processes with the business themselves. They're not solutions they hand over to us. It's teams that need to look after these. So by being able to be a bit more of a face, as opposed to looking at the cold face, as it were, then you can deliver that back. So that's one thing that we've definitely found is...
I think it's a double-pronged benefit in terms of, in many cases, the objective may be to reduce support efforts, and like you said, 90% reduction. But the knock-on effect is, you're starting to look at operational stability and, almost kind of automated business continuity, because you're no longer throwing people at the problem. But on the flip side, you're also allowing your team to focus on what they should be. And I know, Dan, from your perspective, your team's sitting continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And now they can focus on continuous improvement, not on monitoring, for example.
And that's definitely a key driver for us, is how do you look to improve things? And I think it's also that mindset shift. When we started on scheduling, and we discussed it earlier this morning, everything was about when does this start, as opposed to when does it need to be completed. And it was almost not fire and forget, but once something started, okay, it will take what time it takes. But that's not necessarily meeting SLAs, and then you were having to converse with business teams to make sure that the things were happening in the right time. So by taking that transition, it allowed us to hit some key processes and make some real key improvements on them.
Yeah. I think I would love to dive into those particular processes, because I think it's often an added benefit that when people first start working with C2, it's not always the main priority, but once they've seen it in action, you can start automating mission critical processes with much more confidence. Can you just give us an idea from the insurance perspective, and then we'll move on to a banking perspective as well? What kind of core processes have you been able to automate with more confidence, and how have you been able to improve their performance?
So I suppose the first one that springs to mind, we had a quotation process for new business. There was an SLA, it wasn't a business-driven SLA, but a market-driven theory that if you don't respond within 15 minutes, then someone else would have quoted and you've lost that business. So to try and keep up with that speed, we just essentially chucked resource at the problem. So we would have a large number of digital workers pointed at that process and making sure that that 15 minutes was hit. But again, if you have downtime, you have to hope someone notices that and then dives on it straight away. So that one we have definitely seen a huge improvement on. The resource has dropped, but also if something does trip over, I won't sit here and pretend everything is perfect and nothing ever fails. It's restarted very quickly and allows things to drive forward. I think the other one that we noticed, and this was also mentioned, went on an optimization phase with our processes, but before we even did that, we had a weekly bordereau process that would run and complete payments. Typically would run Monday to Friday on a 5-day SLA. Actually, because of the spare resource we had, it completed within 24 hours. So there's a big customer impact in terms of what that's driving out there as well. And that's what, probably come back to your other question, where we've noticed it's not just become about delivering savings, it's how do you advance the business as well, and how do you probably hit those kind of harder to tackle benefits like customer improvements and TMPS and things like this.
Perfect, thanks Dan. And Stefan, from a banking environment?
Yeah, well, I think it's the same story. You have processes which are more critical than others, in particular customer-facing processes like transactions, payments. We have a lot of processes automated in the mortgage area. And when people are waiting for their money to pay their mortgage bills, house building bills, this is you can't afford it as a bank, and through a more automated operation, we could make sure that those processes are running more stable, and that our controller could focus on such critical processes. But we are still on the way to an, let's say, SLA-based operations. This will be our next step, and this will be at additionally operational stability, because if you can scale up your bots, your COBIs, and also your infrastructure based on SLAs and the need of the daily processing, this is obviously operational more stable, but also with a more customer satisfaction, because you can meet then almost every SLA without being manually forced to reduce or to increase bots on a specific process. But this is still a journey we are heading on, and we are very keen to set that up for different processes. And it has still another aspect, because we are saving a lot of licenses and usage of our infrastructure. If we could increase utilization of our bots, then we have better SLA adherence and we have reduced costs. So this is the way we are going.
I think the that trend of, if we can instill more operational stability, it does give your customers more confidence to give you those critical, customer-facing, regulatory or strict SLA processes. What's often missed is there's a huge tranche of technically feasible processes to automate, but in many cases they're not feasible from a business case perspective. So how has the introduction of, I suppose from an orchestration and support optimization, looking at efficiencies, how's that allowed you to start attacking those smaller use cases that now potentially become more feasible because of your reduced total cost of ownership?
Yeah, well, it's exactly that point. Before the introduction of C2, we had for every process we need to reserve a particular Blue Prism license, and every process, even if it was a small one, had at least one robot license. And now with an intelligent orchestration, you could ramp up and down specific processes, and so the cost for these processes in the operational area is decreasing.
Perfect. And Dan, have you seen something similar?
Definitely. Excuse me. Definitely a similar story from our side, in that I don't think we would ever have turned away the smaller wins, but actually the total cost of ownership for them has changed greatly now, because rather than having, as you say, one VDI and one license reserved to run a process once a week and just in case on ad hoc, you can now have that reserved on other ones. The biggest change for me probably noticed was on the event-driven starts. So whereas actually what we would have is a lot of, if someone hadn't saved a file by 9 a.m, then it's the rework from that. It's not just, we'll save the file at 9:05. There was a message from the business to us to do it. A controller has to then take the time to rerun the process. There might be inbuilt MI at the end of it, which gets sent out. Then it raises questions, why was no work done? And all of that over someone being 5 minutes late because of a train or a bus or traffic in the morning. Just creates a lot of rework. So just actually having that control in there allows for things to run more smoothly.
Perfect. And I think the kind of the overall summary of this is really, in the current way of operating with kind of, let's say, the legacy way of operating with, traditional and legacy RPA vendors, is that there's a linear growth between the number of processes you automate, the number of licenses you require, the infrastructure required, and the support FTE that you need in order to operate them. And it simply means the more processes you need, all of these ramp up with it. So we're trying to, and I think what we've been able to achieve in both of these scenarios is really consolidate the cost base to enable sustainable growth, whilst critically and really importantly maintaining or improving operational stability. And I think that's a really, really key thing for especially regulatory processes, key processes. And I always say, whatever process you automate, it's someone's baby. No matter how important it is to you or the general picture, someone owns that process. And it's going to be very important and disruptive if it fails.
Yeah.
Dan, we've touched on this in the past around using best of breed of technologies. And I know in Zurich, there's a range of different technologies from UiPath, Blue Prism, Microsoft is in there with thousands of cloud flows and so on. Abby FlexiCapture from an IDP perspective. Why have you chosen to go down a best of breed approach? What benefits do you see versus going down a single platform approach, for example?
So having multiple technologies, they all have their strengths and their weaknesses. So we would always decide the best tool for the job at the time. It's one of the reasons my role came into play from an architecture perspective of making sure we are using that correct technology. I think another key part of it is resilience. So making sure that if we need to move from one supplier to a different one, we have that option. We don't need to go into different contractual negotiations and be held at risk.
Avoid vendor lock-in, I suppose.
Yeah, completely. So we have that option. We have that feasibility. I say in the UK, primarily it's Blue Prism for RPA, but there have been occasions where we've used UiPath in the past because it was a better solution for that tool. So having I think it was the best in suite, actually. We created our own suite with varying different options in there. But that's why seeing the universal queues come in was quite exciting, because one thing I found with limitations outside of RPA is some of the technologies, and especially some of the business users where we've had success with RPA, they've got very used to being able to have detailed MI from work queues and see what's happening rather than it being in the background. So when we're looking at these newer solutions, that expectation is still there, and some of the other technologies don't offer that. So having something like C2 in the middle to combine them all together and have that approach means we can use that sort of suite that we've got and combine them all together into one. So that's quite an exciting journey we'll be undertaking next year. So looking forward to that.
I think that combining them into one is the key thing, because I think one of the biggest factors of not going best of breed and going through a platform approach is the perceived ease of managing a single technology. So I think if we can help lower the burden of having multiple technologies, give the benefit of allowing you to utilize them, but easing the management of it, that again is something that's really quite important.
Definitely.
Stefan, from your perspective, I know you mentioned Blue Prism. I know there's a host of other technologies in your tech stack.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well,
what are you guys using?
It's the same, like Dan told. There is not one single platform which is feasible for all use cases, and we have different technologies which spread from different parts of the organization. It's not all from, let's say, our process automation area. We have BPM tools like Camunda. We have document intelligence with Google Doc AI. We have chatbots, and we need to combine all those technologies in order to be able to have a robust end-to-end process automation. And that's, well, our next challenge, to combine those technologies. And there is also the question how to operate them, how to manage them over different technologies, and also how to combine all those skills within one COE, within one team, to tackle all those technologies. But this is the next step.
The next step.
Yeah.
Courtney, how are we doing for time? We're good. Wonderful, wonderful. So I suppose from an automation perspective, again, started a long time ago, both are very much scaled. From a C2 journey perspective, I know, Dan, you've already moved from a traditional scheduling method of time triggers to a lot more kind of event-driven orchestration with SLAs, dynamically executing your processes. Stefan, from the SLA perspective, that's something for you that you're embarking on very soon. What do you expect from that? How would you expect that's going to start changing your business?
Well, the first thing is a better SLA adherence. If you are able to have an SLA-based operations, and you could increase and decrease your licenses, machines to the workload, which you have to work on a specific date, and is an automatic operation. So, well, customer satisfaction, our internal customer satisfaction, will hopefully increase, and we could be faster with processes because we could work faster with our backlog. But the second thing is still cost savings in utilization of licenses and also infrastructure.
Yeah. Perfect. And Dan, from your perspective, having already done the SLA part of the deployment, what's next for you?
So in terms of that, at the moment, we've got a big focus on resilience and making sure that actually these processes, because the more embedded they become, the harder they are to recover if something goes wrong. I'm sure most people in the room were affected by CrowdStrike earlier in the year. And as I jokingly said to you on Friday, Ollie, you couldn't have timed this any better, because we did have a small incident on Friday where everything was offline when we came in the morning. Usually my colleague's team would spend the majority of the day getting everything back up and running, trying to make sure things had hit SLA and that we'd contacted the right people. As it was, we could kind of sit back and wait for C2 to take over. And I think by 10 a.m. when I had a message from one of the senior managers asking how everything was, it was just we're confident it's going to hit SLA today. So I think that's going to continue to be a big focus of ours, and how do we make sure that these things are being felt as part of the business. And I think that move to SLA-based processing is helping that massively, because if you work in a team of people, you don't just give someone a task and go, right, keep working that until it's done. You would say to someone, I need this by Friday, I need this in 2 weeks' time. So if the digital workers are operating the same way their team does, it makes them feel more part of the team, and actually helps them embrace them and take that ownership from us.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting analogy on how a schedule would work versus how SLAs work. You know, if your chief executive officer comes to you and puts something on your desk to do, and you've got 10 things on your item on your list to do already, it probably doesn't go to number 11, and you do the first 10 first. The chances are you execute that one first, and then you do the rest accordingly based on the priority or the SLA that would be. So,
interestingly, you treat human beings different than digital workers, because for a human being, you, as Dan said, you say, okay, this is your task and I need it by then. The digital worker are often from the perspective of our internal customers, they need to run from 8 in the morning until 7 in the evening, and it's a change you have to go through with your internal customers to say, no, it's a wrong thinking. You need to tell me when this digital worker needs to have completed his transactions. Yeah. But this is it's a rethinking. It should be natural because you treat human beings like that. But it's still a change you need to have in your mindset when talking about scheduling with digital workers.
Yeah. Yeah. I always find the word scheduling still quite fascinating. If we talk to our friends and family outside of the industry and we tell them about RPA type technologies, for them it sounds groundbreaking. It sounds is it Gen AI? Is it AI? Whatever it may be. But then you talk about how they run. You start at 9. You expect it to finish at 10. But if you receive no work or lots of work, schedule stays the same. If your VMs are up or down, stays the same. Applications available or not, stays the same. So it's just the ability to react in exactly the same way as a human would. If your laptop's not working, what do? Yeah. You try and find a solution, and that's exactly how your digital workers and digital assets should also behave.
So this is the next step.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think we probably got a few minutes. So could we open up for any questions if we have the time?
Got a microphone in the room.
Oh no, not Alan.
Can I just ask, because you both at different points in your journey using C2 as a product, is there anything that's really pleasantly surprised you or the management team or the board in terms of how it operates, or something that they've noticed that they've gone, that wouldn't have happened before? We've noticed a step change in the right direction.
One for me would definitely be around that resilience piece and the recovery of processes. We did used to have a classical issue where Monday mornings, because of weekend patching, could create absolute chaos in production. So the fact that can recover and help, so that's definitely been noticed, because the speed to recovery is there at the senior level. I also think just a hearts and minds piece for the controllers, because no one wants to come in Monday morning and look and go, everything's offline, my day is going to be restarting, restopping. So I think just that makes people feel a bit better. And also, we've actually changed our way of working in production, because people used to sit there and monitor the control room and make sure things were happening and make sure they hadn't terminated. So that's enabled them to change how they operate. And I'm sure my production manager is at the back, so ask her how her team are feeling about it. But I'm pretty sure that they are finding that a definite improvement in their way of working.
Yep, totally agree. Nothing to add. Yeah.
Can I ask one actually? So I've asked lots. New business quotes.
Yes.
So achieving the 15-minute SLA. Again, that wasn't part of the the initial, let's say, business case we put together for the to invest in C2. That's been a surprising benefit. But how do you measure that? So are there direct revenue opportunities that you're seeing that you can attribute to hitting those SLAs or overachieving on those SLAs? And how is that recognised internally?
So internally, I suppose we get the revenue back from the business in terms of our savings. They will do the analysis on the data to tell them how many they have converted from those quotes. If I think from when it was scheduled to where it is now, difficult to put a percentage to it, but I know the queries and the shouting has definitely gone down.
Next time we do this, can we come back with those conversion rates?
I knew you were going to ask me for those conversion rates. I can, Ollie.
That would be lovely. Anything else? Any other questions? I've got two.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, since you've been automated, two questions really one is, has it reduced the amount of fraud? And also, has it increased the number of customers that you've got?
So I suppose in our automation stack at the moment, with new business on, yes, we've definitely had more customers come through that process, and we've seen the trends flexing up on that. Now, I wouldn't say huge percentages, but a definite improvement. In terms of fraud, we don't actually automate huge amounts of fraud protection at the moment. So probably not, but more because we haven't attacked that space from an RPA or automation perspective. They've gone to typically more different vendors where we've got suppliers in place. So I could probably get the stats for those, but definitely not off the top of my head. I don't know if Stefan has anything to add.
Yeah, we have a couple of processes which are working in the fraud area, and they lead to reduced losses because of fraud. But those are different use cases. For example, we are facing from time to time like attacks where, let's say, stolen credit card numbers are tried to be used via online channels, and we see a massive increase. And if we see that, we could run an automated process which are temporarily set the limits down for that particular type of card, so that the fraud risk is going down. So it has an effect also on fraud topics, yeah, definitely. But it's use case specific.
Ollie, we had another question.
Just one here, Dan. Perfect.
We had the microphone. Thank you so much. Just there.
So I was wondering, when you go and meet your bot owners, what is top of their mind? And has that changed since you introduced orchestration? What is the number one question they ask? What is the one challenge they have? And has that changed since you introduced C2?
Who is asking?
Your process owners.
The process owners, yeah.
The process owners.
Or bot owners, yeah. When you go and meet them.
The SMEs.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So from my perspective, typically, if I go back to when we first started, it was actually what was the output, what was the benefit, and we had a lot of those conversations around. There's just generally, one of the challenges we faced was they felt they handed the processes over to us. And we always felt, no, you still own this business process, we're just automating that for you. What C2 has allowed us to do is give them the ownership back, so they now feel part of that journey with us. So now the conversations have become more around, well, great, it's completing this amount of work for me. What about the other 10% that it's not doing? How do we manage that piece of work? What does it look like in our day-to-day flow? One of the other drivers for C2 was we get a lot of requests now, because they have this ownership, for the dashboards. Now, we've started to introduce them in our own team at the moment. I need my federated hubs to complete some work to enable them fully, so they'll get the access when they've done those. But it allows us to actually look at pushing more of that ownership back on the business, so they don't see it as, oh, we've just given you this task and now that's with you. We're acting as one company. So definitely has changed the conversation. They always want more benefit, I'll be completely honest, it's always how do we automate more, but it's made it less about I have no sight of this and it's your problem to how do we achieve this together.
Yeah, I think in the beginning the question were, is it safe, does it work? And also it was few imagination what kind of processes we could automate, but in the meanwhile, well, it's proven, and well, we have a demand, a large, let's say, grassroots demand in the meanwhile, because we are helping teams getting rid of all those annoying work, and as well, our COBIs are trusted and they are well known within Commerzbank in the meanwhile, and we now have set up another 6-year program for further process automation. So the trust of the organization into process automation is really big in the meanwhile.
Perfect. I think just to finish that one as well, I think we probably stop there, is I know Eric's very passionate about this point, is that a lot of the process owners want to see a lot of statistics around their processes, but are they asking for the right statistics? And what we find our customers actually over time, the dashboard they want to see has tens of different widgets on it, lots of information. And then over, the first 6 months or 12 months or 2 years, however long it takes, the data they want to see massively shrinks. And SLA adherence becomes the overall kind of determining factor of, are they getting a good service from the Centre of Excellence, and are they maintaining that service? So we see a load of our organisations using C2 who now just focus on SLA adherence, not first time success rates, not number of exceptions or business or system exceptions, whatever it may be. It's, are we achieving the SLA or are we not? And if we're not, what can we do about it? And I think that's a really important factor.
This is also a change, change management.
Exactly. Anyway, well, thank you very much, guys. I think we are very much out of time, but thank you.
Thank you.